interventions that the federal government can explore for curbing inflation? You know, one of the things that we've spoken about the most in the course of the week is a hike, increasing cost of living, the highest of which is food prices. So as the cost of living continues to rise in Nigeria, in fact, some say it has hit a record high. Many people are struggling to make ends meet. Food, fuel, utilities, rent. The price of everything is increasing and wages are stunted. So,
Stock.
Yeah. This is naturally putting a lot of pressure on families, individuals, and all who are now finding it very difficult to afford the basics. Let's jump right into the conversation this morning. We have two gentlemen, but one of them is here with us in the studio. Mr. Ogunnubi is President, Association of Corporate Treasurers of Nigeria, ACTN. He's also a policy analyst. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, I'm sure you are no stranger to all of the issues that have been raised in the country. What do you make of it? Do you think, first of all, tell us what do you make of it? The high cost of living and how we got here in the first place. Could it have been avoided?
Yes, the answer is yes. It could have been avoided if we had done the right things at the right time.
Right time being?
Do it on time. You know, we always say that the best time to do anything is now. The next best time is, tomorrow. The problem we've had is that we've not implemented the right policy to secure food security. We've not had the right set of coordination of government policy. We've not had that sense of speed, that there's fire on the mountain, run, run, run. So what you find is that when you combine everything together, there's a whole lot of things to be discussed, from the lack of investment in, the critical sectors, agriculture, oil and gas and everything. So when you put everything together, you'll see that we didn't get here by mistake or magic. We got there by deliberate misstep and not taking the right decisions at the right time.
You said that we didn't put the right policies in place to secure, to ensure that we do have food security. So what kind of policies should we have put in place which would have prevented us getting to where we are now?
Well, the first thing is a proper assessment of what is causing the problem. And so when you look at inflation, for instance, the biggest component of our inflation, which we call the consumer price index, is food inflation. The last figures released by the NBS said that inflation is like 29% or thereabout. Food inflation is 34%. So the biggest chunk of it is food. And so, it's a no-brainer that if you can deal with food, the inflation will come down. And so the question is, what did the government do, or what did the people who were the policy in charge of policy do to ensure that food prices were stabilized? So, and then we begin to look at the policies that they put in place and they didn't put in place. Were there effort towards ensuring that, there was some kind of control on pricing? Was there distribution infrastructure put in place to make sure that food can get from the, easily from the farms to the market? Were there efforts put in place to help subsistence farmers? So what we saw was a lot of noise, anchor borrowers, stuff, but there was no synergy, there was nothing.
Let me punctuate you for a bit. The question my colleague here is asking is what policies should have been put in place. Permit me to go back a little, and I'm sure both of you can also relate. When I was growing up, at some point, I don't know when, what year, but definitely was before I got into secondary school, my dad had called my younger brother and I, guys, the cost of milk is rising. So we may have to get substitutes. This was in the 70s. And we may have to get substitutes. And he said that we told him, don't worry, Dad, whatever you say is fine. So price increase started in the 70s. In the government of Shagari in the Second Republic, he came up with what they called austerity measures, all in the interest of trying to address some of these issues. When that government left, the government that followed it, I think, well, not the Buhari government that I remember, the Babangida government came up with all kinds, first tier exchange market, second tier exchange market, structural adjustment program, and all of those things. So what policies, and I'm talking about 30, 40 or so years ago, what policies should have been put in place that would have helped us to stem the tide, even if its prices will increase, not this bad?
I think we're asking the wrong question.
Oh.
In terms of what policy. It's policies, yes. But before you get to policy, you have to ask what is causing it. Okay. It is when you answer that question that you can then say, what policy do I need to address? So the issue here is, what is the cause of our inflation? All right? When you think critically, at it, when you look at it, you realize that our inflation is cost push and not demand pull. And so when you see what has been done over a long period of time, over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of effort at curbing inflation from a demand pull side, that is managing the demand. And that's where you see a lot of monetary policy efforts by the CBN to curb, to tighten and curb money supply. That's what they've been doing. But it has not worked. We will know if it worked because other countries, their inflation is going down. Ours keeps going up. And that tells you that it is not just those monetary policy tools that are aimed to limit demand, but we must look at what is causing cost. So anything, the policies that you should be looking at are policies that will make for cost reduction for food. And the way to do it is, how can we increase production of food? That's the first thing.
Well, Mr. Ogunnubi,
yeah.
There isn't much that anybody can do in the light of the fact that there is insecurity. The farmers would love to go to their farms, but they cannot go to their farms and produce more food. So what policy can correct that? Can you just make a policy, okay, kidnappers, Boko Haram, we ban you? You can't do that.
You're right. You're right. Absolutely. The subject of security is a national thing. It's in the purview of the federal government, and it is something that is very much linked. But that's just one subset of the problem. Nigeria is so vast that even if you say that you have this insecurity in the northeast or the north central, you still have a vast, part of this country that is not affected. So food production should not be a problem. The question is, how have we helped the farmer, whether it's at large scale or subsistence level, to produce? And then how do we help him to store? How do we help him to transport those goods quickly to the market? Those are the three key indices. The question is, if there's no policy that addresses those things, food prices will keep going up. So yes, security is essential, is right. I mean, it's the first thing that you have to look at, but beyond that, we also have to look at other infrastructural and systemic issues.
I like the fact that you just talked about infrastructure now, because I was going to ask a question around that. I remember part of the initiatives. I go back in time because if we did some things that were working at some point, why did we truncate them? And how can we quickly circumvent those things? I remember back in time, there was such an agency or whatever of government as Directorate for Food, Roads and Rural Infrastructure, DFRI. The intention of that was to ensure that road infrastructure, particularly into the rural areas, was okay, so that food can be easily transported. That was in the 80s. I also know that in the previous one or two governments, there was an initiative of, I think, the World Bank with some other partnerships called RAMP, Rural Access something, talking about building rural roads. Okay, I think it was the Fashola government that actually led that among some other things. And they did quite a number of rural roads all over the nation at the time. So is it a problem of sustainability or a problem of resources or a problem of maintenance? Because without those infrastructure, the policies themselves can't move an inch.
You're absolutely right. It's more of everything. It's more of the political will first to do what is right.
Those words again. Political will.
It's the political will.
It wearies me.
You just hit my partner's boil.
Oh, really?
It wearies me. It wearies me. Because the reason I say it wearies me is there are rules, there are laws.
Yep.
In the house, you don't steal. In a house, you don't lie. Now, someone lies, and you're asking me that you need a political will to scold the child? Or am I being too simplistic?
You're being idealistic. let me put it that way. You're being idealistic because you are denying a very important facet of our political economy. That the fact is that before you even talk about economic policy, you need to settle the political question. So if no matter the brilliance of your mind, or no matter the billions of your idea, if the majority of the populace decide that it is some dude, that represents area boys that they want to elect as president, that's it. You have to work with that, and that is where your policy comes in. And so that's where when we tell people get involved in political activity, whatever. To some extent, yes. To the extent to which I can. I'm not necessarily, a very politically buoyant person, but what I try to do is I try to add my voice where I can within my sphere of influence to political thought, to shape the narrative and make people understand that certain things are very important. Certain questions must be asked. If you don't, what you will do is that you will elect people into office that will shape policy for you.
Whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not. And then you have to just go by the policy that they bring.
Okay, Mr. Ogunnubi, do you think that there has been enough investment in agriculture in this country? Bearing in mind that every graduate who leaves school wants to work in an office where he can put a tie on and a suit.
Yes. The answer is no. And like I said, I will go back in time because I studied in the 80s. I came out of secondary school in 1987. And I remember then. Why are you looking at me like
there's something called active listening. So I'm not saying you are old, don't worry.
I mean, in political talk, I'm very young. And I realized, and then back then in school, every student had a plot, a small patch of land that you have to cultivate, and you are scored on it. You're scored on it. So, and everybody, we learned that from secondary school, that agriculture was very important. And guess what? We would take that knowledge back to our gardens at home. And we would grow tomatoes, stuff that we could grow, at the back of our house.
Is that still in the curriculum today?
No, it's not. And this is where, when you're talking about the investment, all right? So the first investment for me has to be in the investment of education. We have kind of walked away from this culture and education of growing things to actually renting things. So, I sit in Abuja and I wait for the FAC meetings to distribute 1.6 trillion, and that's it. I don't add value to anything. Whatever I produce, I just ship. I don't think of processing. I don't think of anything, and that is where the investment has to come in. You know, for us, the government has to look at it. And when I say government here, you know, I don't mean the federal government. I also mean the subnationals.
Okay.
They also have to look at how do we invest in educating the minds? How do we invest in infrastructure for farmers? How do we help people grow, add value, sell, and probably export?
Do you think the situation we're in now is going to guide us to think like that, so that we can improve our circumstances? I mean, for me, right now, we don't even have a choice. But do you think we're going to do that as a nation?
I'm the optimist, you know, and I don't want to say that we're, you know, heading in the wrong direction or whatever. I believe in the drive of the Nigerian to do things if his energy is channeled into these things. We've seen for the past few days how Nigerians have come out because of the super egos. That is one big energy. And what is causing that? A bunch of players in the field kicking the red leather ball has inspired a nation to say, you know, we want to be patriotic. I watched a video the other day and I saw, you know, these ladies in a ladies' hostel, you know, and they were passionate, very passionate. And at some point they were singing the national anthem.
And the national pledge.
And the pledge. So the question is, how do we galvanize that kind of passion to say, okay, you know what, Operation Feed the Nation, the way Obasanjo did it the last time. Or we've declared an emergency on food security. And we have everybody go and start farming something. Go back to your farm or go start something. And we need to have that sense of, look, there's a problem, there's fire on the mountain.
And there's something to do.
Run.
You know, let's see if we can, you know, get some solutions in. Following you on Twitter, some of your responses or reactions to some policy initiatives of the federal government through the CBN is something. Now, there is a concern that has been expressed multiple times by a particular patriotic viewer of this program, saying that, look, for as long as the CBN continues to pump Naira into the economy, we are really looking for trouble. Let me look at his message and read it out. He said, inflation is simply the expansion of money supply. I don't know if you agree with him. Failure to correctly define the problem has led other countries to Venezuela and Zimbabwe. Now he says this: as long as the CBN continues to supply the Naira into the economy, the value can never be stabilized. Do you agree with him?
Yes or no? Traditionally, central banks all over the world have managed inflation through two things, using two tools: interest rates and money supply tightening. That's a traditional way that they've always done it. And, you know, and if we look at what the CBN has done over the last 2 years, they've been doing that. They've raised MPR by almost 750 basis points, from 11-point-something% to 18.75 now. And I can tell you, you know, if I had this crystal ball, that in the next MPC meeting, they will raise the MPR. So they are doing what they are doing. Not just that, also, they are also mopping up liquidity. They are, you know, there's a lot of OMO issuance, and they are mopping up liquidity. So they are limiting Naira supply, you know, to try to tighten inflation. But it has not worked. And that's the point I'm trying to raise, that it has not worked. It's not because it is not the right approach. The CBN has to do that. That's the only tools the CBN have. But there has to be a synergy between monetary policy and fiscal policy. There are some things the CBN cannot do. It has to be done by the government. Infrastructure, food security, supporting farmers, and all that, providing storage facility, working on the what you call the strategic reserves, things like that. That is the purview of fiscal policy. And so if there's no synergy between these two branches of government working in collaboration and synergy to make sure that we're targeting inflation, it has to come down. The CBN will just be doing what they're doing.
Do you see that collaboration happening?
In the beginning, I didn't, but with recent developments, I'm seeing that. I'm beginning to see that there's a lot more coordination going on, and I can only hope that that coordination leads to some sense of order. I'll give you an example. For instance, I mean, during the last interview that the CBN governor gave, he talked about intervention. And he said, we do not have the luxury of failed interventions again. And what was the biggest intervention we had the last time? Anchor borrowers, whatever. What happened to it? What happened to the money? The money was supposed to be for farmers, but it was done by the CBN. It's not the CBN's work. That's not the CBN's job. That is the Ministry of Finance. That is fiscal policy.
So that should have been done through a BOI or something.
Exactly. That should have been done, by the fiscal authorities. And what the CBN governor is saying is, we are going to focus on our core strength. We will leave intervention for those who should do that. And that tells me that there's some manner of communication going on between them.
Now, you talked about coordination.
Yes.
How about collaboration? In the previous government, in the wake of COVID-19, they came up with the Economic Sustainability Plan.
Yes.
And part of that Economic Sustainability Plan was the federal government making a declaration that in collaboration with the states will ramp up food production. Now, even the president in recent time, this president in recent time has said we need to ramp up food production.
Yeah.
That is what I would call an announcement,
Yes.
what we call it, just a statement. Is there a system that can support it? The states have the land. The federal government has a federal Ministry of Agriculture. The president said, I think about the same time he came into power, that, look, we have secured X number of hectares, 500,000 hectares of land or something, that, in Nigeria. They have to have done that with the states.
Yes.
Do you see that collaboration, not just coordination? Do you see that collaboration happening between the federal government and the state governments in a way that within the next 6 months or so, we can begin to see some light?
To be honest with you, no. Maybe I always like to just give the benefit of a doubt. And maybe there's some level of, conversation going on and it's not yet in the public view. But to say that it is clear and obvious that when we look at what is going on, we can see that collaboration. I can't. What I can see is at the federal level, there is coordination. That I can see that at the federal level. So you find that the Ministry of Finance, you can see the synergy between the ministry, the Minister of Finance, and the CBN government. You could see that there's the synergy. They are working together. But that's at federal level. But what is the collaboration going on at federal and subnational level? I can't see that. And I'm pretty sure that if you ask, any objective observer, they will say the same thing. Maybe they are having this conversation at the back end and somehow we will get to know, but we can't say it. And it's important for us to be able to move forward because Nigeria's economy is not a federal economy. Absolutely. It's a national economy.
So how about the National Economic Council? Do you see a job for the National Economic Council here, being that, of course, governors sit at that table?
I mean, the National Economic Council should be the very seat of national economic policy in Nigeria. But it's like it's almost like a party they go to, every now and then to just high five each other and say hi, how are you? I've not seen you for a few days. The issue is this: Nigeria's income, all right, is a national income. It is paid into a federation account. It is divided by federal, state, and local governments, all right? And everybody has a part. So if you are talking education, for instance, now everybody looks at the federal government. It's not a federal government problem for education in Nigeria. It's a subnational issue. But because we have a big brother called the federal government, everybody looks towards the federal budget. But the real income of Nigeria is not the income of the federal government of Nigeria, of the federal income. It's the income of the federal government, the states, all the IGRs put together. That's what makes up our national income. And the NEC, should be that place where we have this broad vision about what we want to achieve, where do we want to go, what is the GDP we are striving forward, and then that trickles down, and when you find that that's not the case, you kind of just wonder when we will get our acts together.
So what should we... Okay, go ahead.
My partner talks about communication all the time. So how can communication and transparency by policymakers help to manage public expectations so that these policies will actually work?
The communication is one of the key elements of, ensuring that you are able to get the kind of response that you need. You can't
buy in sometimes.
Yes, buy in. And that's what we speak about. I mean, I represent the ACTN, and one of the things that we had constantly communicated to the CBN and some of the agencies of government is the fact that communicate with us. We will give you feedback. We will tell you what is going on. You need our buy-in, for some of the policies. Because when you give a policy, for instance, at the CBN level, it affects the banks. But, you are producing policy. We are the ones consuming the policy. So I am the one that is going to tell you that thing I'm consuming is giving me cramps, all right? And it's hurting me here and all that. And so communication is very, very key. And I'm happy that it's one of the things that the CBN governor mentioned, that they are going to do better in communication. The last administration, I'm sorry, if I score them in terms of communication, I'll score them -0.
Ouch.
Because they were doing a lot of things, but they had poor communication.
Unilaterally.
So we also have to differentiate between real communication and just propaganda. So, sometimes, what comes out as communication is not real communication. It's not effective communication. That's what I'm trying to remember. It's not effective communication. It's just you trying to okay, we're doing well, we're fine. No. People need to understand the policy. The tweet you were talking about, the thread I did on the CBN policy, I did a summary, a wrap-up, a recap of it. Before then, all manners of misinformation was flying everywhere. And the reality is that if you don't fill up the space, the communication space with the real information, people will go with anything.
Speculate.
So I had to come out on my own to just say, okay, fine, this is a recap. These are all the policy moves of the CBN in the last 2-3 days. This is what it means. These are the implications. And guess what? The response was overwhelming. People were thanking me. And they're why are you thanking me? They said, thank you because you broke it down.
Yeah.
You made us understand it. And you made us see that there's a pathway forward. Our institutions, starting from the National Registration Agencies, and all the people, Ministry of Information, and all these people tasked with information, they must do better.
You mean they need to understand the policies? We'll come to that some other time. But talk to the young people. I was having a conversation with some of our colleagues. We were having a conversation with some of our colleagues before this program. The people who are in government today, they were not in government 30 years ago.
Yes.
Those who are in government today will not be in government 30 years from now.
Yes.
In fact, a good number of the people complaining on social media and all now will likely themselves be in government.
Correct.
Speak to the young people. What our body language should be, what our disposition should be to whatever it is that is going on right now. It is looking very hopeless. Food, everybody wants to jackpot, rent, everything is going high and all of that. In fact,
transportation.
It's like the jackpot noise has come down a little bit because it's costlier now to jackpot. So speak to the young people about this pathway and the kind of engagement that we should be having with all elected people who said, I beg to apply through their votes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ayo, for that question. The first thing the young people need to do is educate themselves about governance, just public sector governance. One of the most frustrating things for me, when I listen to young people, is how uninformed that they are. And sometimes we have to look at it. Maybe our education system, current education system, is not helping with civic education. Maybe. But they need to educate themselves about what is the process of governance. Let's take the issue of getting a bill passed. What's the process like? What's there are public hearings, there's a way that you can push a bill and all that kind of thing. Because a lot of the times, our young people are in the generation of the reactors. They react after something has been done. And then when they are challenged, and the politicians will say, but, we went through the process. And the process, yes, they went through the process. But if our young people understand that first, you need to understand what governance is and what is the process, and how you can take advantage of that process to change policy. I'll give you an example. This organization, YAGA, they're a perfect example of how you can shape policy with advocacy, youth advocacy. So first, they need to be educated. Secondly, they need to organize. There's something about youth. It's about energy. It's about idealism. It's about shaping the future. It's, when I talk to my daughter, I have a 21-year-old, and she's always full of ideas. And I was like, Farabale, cool down.
I hope you take some of those ideas.
I used to be at that age. I used to have that. And then she said, no, your generation has done it. I said, it will soon be our generation. And then we'll see what we do. So they need to be educated. They need to organize. That education helps them to know how you can organize.
Absolutely.
And then how you can take advantage.
Yeah, so many issues to discuss. We definitely have to bring you back to have further conversation, particularly this particular part of youths being informed about the things that need to do. Ogunnubi, President, Association of Corporate Treasurers of Nigeria, and a policy analyst. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Unfortunately, we're not able to have that other guest, but hey, perhaps some other time. We're back right after now. We have another conversation coming. Do stay with us.